Steve, those stories were fantastic. Just
Thanks.
loved them. And I closed my eyes.
Oh, good.
Liz, why are Latter-day Saints so good at sci-fi?
Oh man, how much time have we got to explain this? No, but I think at a time when we have so many technological innovations, science fiction is a super important tool for us to look at the future, right? Science fiction pretends to be about the future, but it's really always about today and about what problems we're concerned with today. So we see a lot of those thought experiments going on in science fiction, and it's so important as we look to the future for us to keep writing those from our own perspective as Latter-day Saints.
So Orson Scott Card's the most famous. Of
Yes.
course, half of us have read Ender's Game 5 or 6 times.
Yeah, it was interesting returning to Ender's Game now that AI is in existence. Ender's Game was so prophetic about the importance of message boards in the internet, like he basically predicted the internet in the 80s and how it would change politics, what people wrote anonymously. And as I was getting ready for this conference, I went back and listened to some of the Ender books and thinking about this character of Jane, who is an AI, and how she evolves over the course of the story is really interesting. She starts out as a program that exists in the battle school, training children to fight in a war against aliens as a psychology program, right? So we're doing that mental health, that therapy thing that people are doing with AI in a complex game, video game kind of way for children. And as they interact with it, it generates more content for them. And then interestingly, when Ender, the genius character of the series, when his mind interacts with the AI, he breaks the pattern and it has to generate all new things for him, which reminds me a lot of the AI delusions we see nowadays, right? Of people who are like, I'm the special one. I woke up the AI and now it is teaching me the secrets of the universe, right? And that this already existed in science fiction long before we see it happening now. But then Jane evolves over thousands of years. She becomes an intelligence that's applied to many different problems. And over like 3,000 years, she becomes an actual individual and is endowed with a soul. And eventually, in a very Latter-day Saint way, like her telos, the end of her life is to become an embodied person, right? And to gain a body. So it's interesting to see this progression from the AI that's generating content based on interaction with humans, all the way to a child of God, an embodied intelligence.
We're often a faith that thinks a lot about our past. Famously, we don't have theology, we have history. But it's interesting, too, that we're often depicted in sci-fi.
Yeah.
Battlestar Galactica, I think we were involved. Expanse, I still think about this sci-fi show, The Expanse.
Yeah.
There was a spaceship temple.
Yeah.
Spaceship Nauvoo.
Floating through space. Not Nauvoo, right?
And reverently shot, right? In the scene, the point of view that's layered into that visual is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, until it gets, retrieved and turned into a battleship, and put the command center on the altar of the temple. Whatever. It's fine.
But I'm curious about how we ought to think about our relationship to the past, but also to the future. And I think there's always a temptation to nostalgia in human nature. And there's also a temptation to Pollyannish, things will magically get better. But how does speculative fiction help us wrestle with the present?
One interesting thing I found in looking for Latter-day Saint depictions of AI is a story that was published by Michael Austin in 1989 in BYU's science fiction magazine, The Leading Edge. And he is doing a lot of the same things you did in your story just now, Stephen. He talks about the main character is this English professor who is finally going to publish his textbook, which is 2-sentence summaries of the 100 best books that have been created by this machine that can perfectly determine what the meaning of this text is. And finally, we'll have it done, and we don't have to bother with any of that messy description, all that useless novel stuff. It's so efficient. And then another old-fashioned English professor comes in and is very upset about this and points out that, the experience is the point. And so we see this kind of tension between efficiency, which I think is a very Latter-day Saint impulse. We are very organized in our intelligence. We like to come up with systems that are repeatable and useful all over the world, but we need to balance that with the need for real experiences that are not simplified, that can't be squished down into a curriculum and packaged out to people.
Steve, I loved your slide with Baudrillard's ideas, and I was thinking about that experience of the simulacra and simulacrum that had this vision of a semantic feedback loop.
Yeah.
That if a mic gets too close to the speaker, it becomes just absolutely
That's a good analogy.
horrible thing, because it's turning in on itself.
Yeah.
And somehow imagination needs to have this openness towards one another, towards God. So I was curious, James, as one of my favorite imaginative creators, what are your concerns about the way that AI might form us as creative creatures?
One thing I was thinking about is another Stephen Peck text. It's called The Tragedy of King Lear, Goatherd of the LaSalles. And this is set in a future in southern Utah where this patriarch of a family is trying to kind of pull the remaining ring value out of this land that's been disrupted and overtaxed as a goat rancher, large-scale industrial goat rancher. And there's a character in there who's a battle bot. And you get to, because of the power of fiction, to create point of view, you get scenes that are through the point of view of this battle bot. And you notice how it sees everything in terms of target obstacle, right? It's got this very narrow range of reality because its optimization leads to selective blindness, right? We wear optimizer blinders when we reach just toward one value. Part of the genius and terror of that book is that you then realize that Lear thinks the same way, it's just economic, right? He sees cash rather than targets. And so I think in all these speculative works we've been talking about, it's not just about what might technology do, but what is a range of human relationships to the technology, and what happens when we develop systems of thinking that kind of move down one rabbit hole. Yeah. And so, I definitely would be concerned about that feedback loop kind of effect. I think there's things too where this happens in tons of industries. We look for the minimum viable product. What's the thing that's like just good enough? Folgers coffee famously used to be good, and then gradually they put in more and more of the cheap coffee beans, because if you were drinking coffee all the time, who cares? And then a whole new generation didn't want to drink coffee, and then Starbucks appeared and that kind of thing. But we have this sort of gradual watering down of quality that happens anyway. I worry when we can automate processes, right? That we're not going to get brilliant scientific insights from the papers. We're going to get the just good enough. Yeah. And a lot of that work slop, that spirit slop that we've had referenced in different sessions. So those would be some of my concerns about what happens, is that we have this beautiful shared imagination scape we've built, and maybe we're going to have a mudslide of content come through it and homogenize and dampen the way we've been thinking. Yeah. I don't think that's a necessary byproduct of AI though, right? Like you could use the technology in other ways. I think that's the byproduct of using them in the easiest ways. Yeah. Instead of finding more interesting use cases. I think there is a job for every tool. You just need the right tool for that job. And a lot of times we've defaulted to the wrong ones. We've taken this replacement mindset instead of leaning into the specific potentials of what this algorithm can achieve. Yeah.
This is reminding me of a story that I got from Lee Allred, which isn't published, but hopefully we'll publish it in my science fiction magazine soon. But he looks at the uses of AI for missionary work and what parts of missionary work could you outsource to an AI like LDS bot? You know, the information, the mirroring of the personal conversation and feeling understood. But can you outsource testifying and the spirit? No, you can't. And so there's like this companionship that needs to happen between the AI that can adapt itself to this person's situation, explain things really well, but the testimony has to come from a human because that's where it is. And so noticing what the tool is good at and not using it for things that it's not good at and that it can't replace.
Yeah. Well, and I think in my own practice as a writer, it's not just a matter of switching domains, but thinking about, sometimes people use these algorithms for, well, a lot. The primary use case is summary. How do I take a lot of data and simplify it down, right? A lot of people in writing are using AI to say, write it for me and do...
Write the lit review.
Here's the basic thing, right? And in some domains that may be fine. In creative writing, that's death, right? Because we're trying to create novel relationships, have communication that has spirit, but also that is data and not a product, not downstream of other data. And we're trying to take distinct voice and language that can grab you by the spirit and not something that has this sort of skin deep reach.
Yeah.
So that doesn't work. But I do sometimes use the same tool. It's the same algorithm to say, how can I use AI basically as a search engine, but to look for things that are difficult to find via Google? Where I say, one recent one was, okay, can you show me articles about someone's experience interacting with a CTR ring and how a CTR ring was part of their decision-making process? What this does is, instead of simplifying and taking all these stories and turning them into one, I'm asking it to reverse that process and take a general type, I imagine, but guide me to something deeper. David Taylor was here today. He works with me in the church history department. And he's been interested in, AI's done pretty effective work in handwriting recognition. And so there may come a day when I can take the collections of the church history library, just tons of handwritten 19th century data, and search it not only by word, but with this sort of contextual clues and say, hey, how many times did pioneers run into a skunk? What was their experience of that, right? That's something that would be intensely laborious now. The point there is that I'm asking AI not to homogenize data, but to differentiate and variate for me. And through that exploration, I can then run it through my human consciousness and create something with texture and specificity. So I think I see the tool, if I let the tool drive, the concern is the mudslide, the homogeneity, everything blended. If I drive, but let the tool lead me places I might otherwise not have the path to go, then I think it can add increased texture and interest. And maybe I'll make connections which are not intuitive to the AI. They're not already pattern clusters, but I'll be able to find them and introduce that into the range of available associations, right? That's what we're doing. I have gotten comfortable with the fact that I'm going to be plagiarized a lot in my lifetime, but I can't. It's incestuous if I am borrowing from the plagiarism machine to then be plagiarized and reproduced, right? We need to invest in this base of creativity and connection building.
I think the worry I have about thinking of AI as a neutral tool that you can use wisely or poorly is because it has such a profound effect on formation for those who use it repeatedly, and especially among the young. And so you, James, can use it in a creative way because you were pre-formed in other ways of attention. But if our kids are growing up in an environment where they really never have to go through the archives and read the hard things or do anything hard, how are they going to have the resources to ever ask the right questions that can lead to They kind of created breakthroughs that are really rare and precious.
Yeah.
So I have just this general anxiety about how do we have formations of attention today, and maybe what the role of literature can be for that.
I'll go quickly, but I'm a poet, among other things. Poetry slows you down, right? It's in a time when we're trying to do everything more quickly. The point of a poem is almost this bubble for your consciousness to step into and slow down. And so I do think that's important, and being able to engage with other people is a way to do it. I do tell people that I am a talker first and a writer second, right? That formation in relationship that the Doctrine and Covenants values, where we connect and are edified together, those sparks are very important to me. And I think that's important to raising people. My wife teaches writing at BYU and builds writing assignments to push toward human connection in a way that when AI came, it was less of an issue in her class, because you can't have an AI version of an assignment where you called someone you love who you disagreed with and say, hey, what was your motivating value? Help me understand that, right? No AI can reproduce that. So I think those things are important, and we do have tools to build that kind of culture. In some ways, sorry, I'll wrap up here, but I hope that the work slop and the spiritual slop components of AI can be a wake-up call to help us remember what writing was about. I was at a conference where somebody came by in the vendor hall. I was talking to a friend and said, have you talked to the woman there? She has a method to write 1 to 2 million words per year. And we said, no, thank you. Jesus, please save us from that kind of efficiency, right? Because if you're writing, this is thousands and thousands of pages per year, right? You're not simmering it down. You're not finding, you're not choosing. It's a less agentic mode of writing. That writer is now obsolete, right? Already, because AI can write 1 million words today. And so hopefully what we can do is see when we're writing just to reproduce existing patterns, that's different than learning to explore, connect, and reach into new patterns. And I hope that what we learn from AI is not just let's use AR tutors for mastery, right? That can be a component, but also let's create a pedagogy of humanity, right? Let's create literary communities that are moments where we connect and spark together. And I think it's that ability, the kind of thing Wayfair is doing, where you give us a reason to write that is not surfing an algorithm for human attention and getting just good enough to keep people reading, but instead bringing our creativity and our whole spirits toward encounter. And that is what I hope AI can save us from by counterexample.
And that's exactly what I experience as a writing teacher at BYU, right? I have to reframe writing for my students because they're used to writing means I create X number of words on the page and turn it in, and that's what writing is. And reframing it as writing is process oriented. It's thinking. So when you do the work of writing, you do the work of refining your ideas. That struggle and that resistance that you experience in putting your words on the page is useful. It's not something we need to hurdle over by using AI to generate those words and make it easier for us because we have writer's block. No, we have to learn to value that difficulty because that helps us to think. And then 2, we have to look at writing as something that's relational, something that's come up a lot today. I make my students write papers to someone in the class who disagrees with them about the idea. And so they see, oh, my document is not just, 2,000 words I'm turning in and I'm getting a grade back. It's I'm having a conversation with my classmate who thinks X about this topic and I think Y, and how am I going to explain to them why Y is important? And so getting that, like, I am talking to someone, and AI can provide you lots of reasons, but it doesn't do well at that connection to an individual human through your writing. So I try to focus on those two bits. And I think of it as, when we mechanized things like farming and things like manufacturing, we all started to have to go to the gym or go running, right? We didn't get our physical fitness through our everyday life. And we may be coming to a point where you don't get your mental fitness through your everyday work. You need to go to that mental gym and wrestle with those ideas, getting them into words by yourself on the page, and making yourself do that when you know there's a shortcut out there is hard, just like going to the gym.
Yeah.
I think reading fiction's a little more fun than the gym.
Right. But the writing of fiction, man, that still feels like the gym to me.
That's true.
We have time for probably 2 questions. Are there any from the crowd for our panel? Yes.
Curious, do each of you have a thought experiment that you like to use when people begin to question whether AI is becoming conscious? Because we're going to get more and more of that. It's kind of out, but
Yeah, I actually have a really good example. I borrowed one.
Do we have a thought experiment we use when people ask if AI is becoming conscious?
This is a thought experiment by philosopher Frank Jackson that I think is really kind of compelling. He says, imagine in the future there's a neurobiologist who scientifically understands everything about seeing the color red. There's nothing she doesn't know. Have you heard this? I think that's one of the best. And so she's not only the world's expert, she knows everything from the time the light ray hits the retina to the time it's processed by the visual cortex and how it's disseminated. She knows it all. But here's Jackson's sort of, I think, clever move. He says, but she's colorblind. And he says, so they fix it, and for the first time, she sees the color red, and he asks, does she learn anything? And you have to be pretty strangely arrogant or something to not be a little uncomfortable with the notion that she didn't learn anything, that she sees red and goes, yeah, just as I expected. Yeah, that's the experience I expected right there. That's he uses a limit of science, that there are things about consciousness that we don't understand and we can't get there, and we'll never get there because it's outside of the realm of science. Experience, I think, is the name of the game in consciousness studies, and there's a great philosopher named Peter Godfrey Smith that wrote a whole book on experience in animals that I think's mind-blowing. But that's my go-to analogy. Why I'm skeptical that that's a good one.
Yes. Sorry, in the back. I don't want to prioritize the front.
I like the skunk story. It seems to me that there's a lot of data out there that is not being engaged with by our LLMs and other AIs that are combing. There's a lot of material in archives like you're talking about in the LDS archives that nobody's seen. And one of my friends pointed out that every AI has a cutoff date. And so after that cutoff date, there may not be recent data. And as I was in this conversation with this person, it was kind of, well, then you're saying that ancient data, which could be 50 or 100 years or 5,000 years, and data in the last 10 months or 5 months or from yesterday is missing in the view of our AI tools.
So the question, I think, is it's about data and kind of what data does AI have access to and how our response is going to be different because of that data. And I think we see all kinds of things in that. So yes, If you feed in a lot of 19th century manuscripts, you're going to get different language style, different sort of responses than if you do other things. We saw from Josh, his LDS bot is working from church resources. You know, you'd get different answers on some of those topics if you included the whole General Conference corpus back to the beginning. And Journal of Discourses. And so certainly we could use better awareness from people that when we're asking for pattern recognition, that this is what the machine does, right? AI is not an independent essence. It's a pattern recognition tool that's working from data sets and looking for patterns in that data set. Now, I sometimes, Google's Notebook LM allows you to upload a certain set of data and work within that data set. So there's ways to play with that are interesting. And yes, I think that's really important to understanding AI, to understand it's not just, if you just take ChatGPT as the vanilla and neutral, and this just is what AI means, you're not getting the same experience as if you understand you could use pattern recognition tools with different data sets to do different work. And the caution that Steve noted before, if we start adding in AI generated data to the data sets and AI is trained on, the AI is now drunk, right? We have drunk AI, and that may be a progressive problem to deal with, especially if we're not able to distinguish what is human generated, what is AI generated, because we've blurred the lines so much in our practice.
Makes me think we need an LLM trained on Babylonian cuneiform. That those answers would be very different.
Gilgamesh bot, I love it.
Let's do it.
Well, please thank these panelists for their wisdom and attention.